All right, well, it's 7 o'clock here, so we'll get started. I'm Ralph Schurter with Dark Skies Fly Fishing, and we're happy to have you here tonight to spend some time talking about Hendricksons. Tonight is the first in a series of four webinars. This is collaborations between Dark Skies Fly Fishing and Precision Fly and Tackle. And each one is going to break down one major hatch here in Pennsylvania. And tonight's, of course, the Hendricksons. And then we'll have the Grannoms, March Browns, and Sulphurs. So very major hatches if you live in this area. For those of you who got to this webinar from posts you may have seen on Precision's social media or perhaps from their newsletter, if you're not familiar with Dark Skies Fly Fishing, we are a regional fly fishing magazine covering the Mid-Atlantic region. And the website has been in existence for about 6 years now, but the magazine began 2 years ago. And after we published our first issue in March of 2024, one of the first phone calls I got was from Justin Pittman here, the owner of Precision Fly and Tackle. And he asked how he can help make the magazine a success. So I'm incredibly grateful for your support, Justin. And I'm glad to be teaming up on this to provide a really good knowledge base, to give good knowledge base for the people who have supported us. So thank you. And then, so if we want to jump right in here, one of Justin, do you want to say anything? Introduce Gary here, who will
Yep.
be in our presentation.
Yep. Thanks, Ralph. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Yet Ralph has done an incredible job with the magazine, and Gary Leone here, my best buddy and friend. He's a gifted tyer and angler, and I think everybody's gonna be excited about his presentation tonight in the series that we have coming up. But thanks again, Gary, for everything. And again, I hope everybody asks questions and gets a lot out of this.
Cool. Well, Gary, you want to share your screen and get started with your presentation about Hendricksons?
Say that again, Ralph.
Mhm. And as we said, if you guys have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them down there in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer everything that we can.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Justin. As he said, just briefly, my name's Gary Leone. I guide for Precision here in the Cumberland Valley, so around the Yellow Breeches, Mountain Creek, Big Spring, all the area streams here, as well as northern Pennsylvania up near Ralph in the Kettle Creek Valley, so Kettle Creek and all of its tributaries. So I'm very fortunate and I appreciate having access to all the hatches pretty much that we see in Pennsylvania between those two watersheds. Uh, so I wanted to share with you tonight. We're hoping to talk about the hatches, and I'm going to share my screen here quickly. Uh, And so I put together this presentation last year, and we did it here in the Mount Holly shop, and we had a lot of positive feedback for it. So we're excited to bring it back to you this year and integrate the online aspect of it as well, as we have people here in the shop this evening. Thanks everybody for either coming into the shop tonight or for logging in online. The program I came up with last year is we called it Hatches, and basically it's integrating insect behavior into fly design and fishing tactics. So how do these different insects act and behave, and what are their life cycles, and how do they behave throughout their life cycle? And then we try to take that behavior and put it into both our fly design at the vise while we're tying throughout the winter this time as we get excited for the hatches, and then once we're on stream, how do we fish those patterns and to effectively mimic what's actually happening with the insects? Tonight, we're going to discuss the Hendricksons. The Hendricksons are often the very best, or the first good dry fly fishing of the season. There's some blue-winged olives, blue quills, little midges, stuff like that. But The Hendricksons are in most streams in Pennsylvania and the East Coast. I lived in upstate New York for a while. I lived in Michigan for a while. Hendricksons are usually the first hatch that everybody gets excited about. Historically, they've coincided with opening day in a lot of streams, so everybody would really look forward to the Hendricksons. Some watersheds, they actually start hatching before opening day, like we have that here in the Cumberland Valley. Our Hendricksons oftentimes start the, third week of March sometimes, third or fourth week of March, weather depending. And so that's actually before the opening of the season. So you'll have to find the special regulations area to fish those. Um, so as I said, it is the first major mayfly hatch. It usually happens. So when does it happen, right? It's different in the Cumberland Valley than it is up at Kettle Creek, usually by about 2 or 3 weeks. And that's usually related to stable temperatures. More or less, the Hendricksons will start hatching when the water temperatures get to about 50 degrees consistently. So the first day water hits 50 degrees, these bugs aren't going to be hatching all over the place like crazy. So usually takes some stability there. Uh, and then also another way to tell when the Hendricksons are going to hatch is when the forsythia blooms. That's the photo on the screen is the forsythia bush. And there's a biological phenomenon called phenology where you can document relationships between animals and plants on the earth because they're all, scheduled to happen at the same time. So you can usually pair up a bug hatch with some sort of flower or shrub. Um, Grannoms, for example, or when the red buds bloom. Hendricksons usually when forsythia blooms. So when you see these yellow flowers, popping out on the bushes, there's a very good chance that the have started or will start pretty soon. Um, and I know I'm going to fly through these slides. I most of those, from exercise because we want to get to the fly time. So I'm sorry if I'm going fast. The first phase of the Hendrickson is the nymph. Um, so before they hatch into adults, the nymphs live on the stream bottom pretty much year round. And they're what's defined as a crawler nymph because they're not really good swimmers. They're kind of big, bulky, muscular for a mayfly insect. And they're, as far as compared to the size of their bodies, their legs are pretty small as well. So very poor swimmers. And so those bugs will live under the rocks, and then a week or so before they get ready to hatch, they'll leave, the bottom of the stream, and they'll start crawling on top of rocks, and then they start practicing their swimming. And what they'll do a lot of times is they live most of the year in riffles, and then they'll slowly get in the drift, where they'll allow themselves to be drifted out of the riffles a lot of times into slower water. So like your runs that are just downstream of the riffles, the nymphs will drift down to those runs and they'll practice a lot of times. They'll practice for days because they're such poor swimmers. They need to swim to the top so they can hatch. And because they're such poor swimmers, it takes them several attempts to get to the top of the water column. So they start practicing days in advance. Well, guess what? When that starts happening, the trout take notice. So even though we're not seeing the dry flies on top of the water, there's a lot of activity underneath the stream surface and the trout take notice. So you can start fishing Hendrickson related nymphs during those times. We'll talk about some of those later. And this can be a very effective way to catch fish at that time. So after they finally start making it to the surface, after these attempts to swims, they get into what we call the emerger stage. And one of the unique things about Hendricksons is most of the Hendricksons, instead of getting to the top of the water surface and crawling out of their shucks, they hatch under the water surface. And that's a photo here. And I should have mentioned this last slide. I received permission. I'm not a photographer, so all of the photos that I'm using in my presentation tonight are from the website troutnut.com. And the owner of that, Jason, I contacted him and asked permission if we could use his photos, and he was happy to. He's an ecologist for the Washington Fisheries Department, And he said as long as we're using them for education, he appreciates us sharing, his information. So if you're into this sort of stuff and you want more photos like this, and he goes through all the hatches, it's troutnut.com. And it's pretty a fascinating website that he's put his time into. So this photo here Jason took is of one of the Hendricksons hatching under the surface of the water. You can see its nymphal shuck still attached to it as the adult dun starts to escape it and through that molting process. Once those flies get to the surface, the unique thing about we classify um, the whole hatch as a Hendrickson, but the interesting thing about the Hendricksons are the males and females are distinctly different. So the female Hendricksons are usually lighter in color. They're a size 12 or 14, and they have kind of a dunnish gray wing, like a light dun wing if you're a fly tyer, a light dun wing. And although they're usually like a pinkish tan, that varies from stream to stream. There's about 7 different colors of Hendricksons in different areas that have been documented. So different watersheds, they can be different colors. So check your local watershed, see what color your bugs are if you want to come up with exact matches to that. So like if I'm fishing down here on the Yellow Breeches, those Hendricksons can be a different color than up on Kettle Creek, for example. When I lived up in Michigan, I used to fish northern Michigan a lot, and the Hendricksons up there are pretty red in color. Um, so that's the female Hendrickson, and that's the classic. The male is the known as the red quill. So it is darker. You can see that's the same biologically the same insect as the female Hendrickson, except the males are one size smaller, so that usually go with a size 14 when tying or buying your patterns, and they're more of a darker reddish rusty color than the female Hendrickson. A lot of times these bugs will hatch at different times, or even if they overlap and they're both hatching at the same times, certain fish may lock in on one or the other. So if you have a fish rising and you see bugs and they're not reacting to your female Hendrickson pattern, that fish might be eating the males, and you want to switch over to a darker red quill imitation. Timing of the day, basically the Hendricksons usually hatch in the afternoon. Um, so right around 1:30, 2 o'clock. And again, this depends not only on the stream, but also the temperature too. Because on hot days, a lot of times they can start hatching, 10 o'clock in the morning or so, give or take. So just be prepared for that. They're hard to time exact, and these are there's always variances and variables in fishing. There's no absolutes, I like to say. Uh, Hatches typically last about 45 minutes to an hour and a half window for the emergence and for the hatch. Another thing, when you're having a heavy hatch, when there are bugs all over the place, fish are opportunists. So um, there are things called stillborn duns. And what a stillborn dun is, you can see in Jason's photo there again, that bug is floating on the surface of the water, and you can see it's trying to shed its nymphal shuck, and it hasn't. So whether some reason it died, whether it drowned it or whatever, but that fly is stuck in the shuck and can't get out, can't dry its wings off and fly away. Fish tend to notice these things, and like I said, they're opportunists. They will seek out these stillborn duns or cripples if one gets a bent wing or a broken wing or something happens to it. Fish target those. So when we're tying our patterns, we want to mimic that too a lot of times in some of our patterns, because fish learn the easy ones that aren't gonna, they don't want to race to try to get that food source and have it fly away before they get to it. So they learn to recognize these things. And then finally, the last stage of the hatch is the spinner fall. And so what happens after the adults do make their way off the water, they'll usually go to the trees and live for a day or two, 2 days, 3 days sometimes. And after they live their life cycle, they'll go on to their mating flights. And what happens there is usually the riffles that they were born out of, the males will return to the riffles first, and they'll hover over your head for, a while, about an hour. You'll start seeing, a couple of them, and then you'll see a dozen of them. And before you know it, if it's a good spinner fall, there's, hundreds and thousands of them sometimes. And what the males are doing, they're waiting for the females to come out. And then so finally, hopefully, if everything stays right, a lot of times if the air temperature dips below 60 degrees and it cools off at night as it gets towards sunset, the females won't come, and the spinner fall basically never happens, and they fly back into the trees. But when the temperatures do stay ideal, the females will come, they'll join the males, they'll mate together over the water, they'll mate. And after the mating occurs, the males fall dead to the water. The females return to the trees usually for their eggs to ripen, and the fish will start eating the males a lot of times. And we'll talk about this later in the evening. Remind me if I don't bring it up again. How we want to fish different patterns through this evening spinner fall, because it changes. Sometimes if fish can be really picky, there may be a reason for that. So then after about an hour or so, the female's eggs will ripen. They'll come back to the water, and they'll have a bright yellow egg sac attached to their backside. And they'll either drop their eggs from above the water, or they'll start tapping themselves and bouncing on the water, releasing their eggs so they float to the bottom in the riffles. And then after that process occurs, then the females then die and lay on the water spent. Again, similar to the duns, the females are usually a size bigger and a little lighter in color. And that's basically it for the, I know it was a quick version, but like I said, I didn't want to bore you with a death by PowerPoint there. That is the life cycle of the hatch.
I think that was great. Do we have any questions? And then before we start the fly tying aspect here, Justin, you want to give away something here?
Sure.
You want to tell us what you have to give away?
Just muting some stuff real quick.
Sure.
Sure. So we got 4 or 5 prizes tonight. We got some tacky fly boxes, and we got a different array of cling magnets. So we'll do the first giveaway here tonight. And whoever Ralph selects, if you could just put your information in the chat to Ralph, so that we got a mailing address. You can send that all to Dark Skies Fly Fishing, Ralph, if you put that information out, and then we'll put it all in the mail to all the winners tomorrow. So here will be the first giveaway tonight. This is the bigger cling magnet. Ralph will pull a random person, and
Cool.
we'll get it out tomorrow.
This is going to be super technical. I'm just going to look the other way and spin through the names and wherever the cursor lands. So I'm going to go back. We got William Bowman. So William, I think the best might be just to email me, info@Dark Skies Fly Fishing, and I'll forward that on to Justin. Send me your address, your mailing address, and I'll get that to him. And that is for the cling. All right. And then I also have a gift pack of high and dry. It includes line dressing, fly line dressing. We got powdered floating desiccant, liquid spray, and powdered floating applicator brush, and some paste floating. So we'll pick a winner here the same way. Let's kind of go back and forth. And we got Rob Tillman, Tilghman. And again, if you could just email me, info@darkskiesflyfishing.com. I'll get that sent out to you as well. So we had a question. So basically, Hendrickson nymphs are prevalent most of the spring. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the closer they get to hatching, the more active they get. So the more they'll be leaving, their layers under the rocks and stuff like that. They'll start eating more, just become active, like I said, and then they'll start that swimming practice. But yeah, there will be Hendrickson nymphs in the stream year round. Uh, because once those eggs are laid, that starts the cycle again. They'll be little and tiny, and throughout the year, all through the summer, fall, winter, they're still there in the stream. They're just usually kind of, not as active and under the rocks. So, but they're still available because they are such terrible swimmers. They get loose quite a bit, and so the fish do look for them year round.
Awesome. And then what are the color of the females in Kettle Creek watershed? We got some Kettle Creek fans on here tonight. I love it. Do you want to answer that, Gary? You're muted there, buddy.
I had my volume down so we didn't have feedback. What was the question?
What are the color of the female Hendricksons in Kettle Creek from your
Yeah,
experience?
they're a pinkish tan for the females up there.
Are the nymphs the same size as the adults when they're getting close to hatching? Yes, I think mostly a size 12 and 14
Yep. Yep.
nymph. Yep, that's
12 and 14.
yep.
Like with most hatches too, it seems like a lot of times, there are different broods and stuff. So a lot of times they'll start out at 12s and then as the hatch goes, they get a little smaller, where there's 14. So when I'm fishing, I usually start with a 12. If I can get them to eat a 12, great. If they're not, same with the dry flies, nymphs and dries, I do that. I'll start with the 12 and if it's not working, then I'll drop down to the 14s if need be.
Cool. And then how long does it take them to go from egg to hatching adult? Is it a 1 year cycle
For
or
the
longer?
Hendricksons, I don't know. I don't want to make something up. I don't know if they're annual or every 2 years. If we have any experts on here, I'm a fisherman, not a biologist. So
Cool. You want to give away another prize there, Justin?
Absolutely. All right, we'll give away Pescator tacky fly box. So this is one of the new minis that just come out, I think, here in the last couple weeks. Um, so this will be the next giveaway.
And we got Patrick Smith.
And also for everybody watching in-house, we'll have one-time use hatches, 15 codes, so 15% off. Most of our website, there is a few things that are excluded from that, obviously on sales items, used gear, a few other items that we can't discount, but hatches 1.5. Hatches 1.5.
Cool. So just go to precisionflyingtackle.com when you check out hatches 1.5. And I don't know if you heard me, Patrick Smith, you're winning that fly box. So again, just email info@darkskiesflyfishing.com. Send me your address and we'll get that. The chat is disabled for whatever reason, so you can pop all your questions right here in the Q&A. I saw Jeff, you'd asked that question. How long is it typical for the Hendrickson dry fly to come off once they emerge to the surface? How long is typical for the Hendrickson dry to fly off once they emerge to the surface? There's a better answer. So once they are in that film there and breaking free of that nymphal shuck, about how long, Gary, until they're actually lifting off the water as an adult?
So that varies. I mean, it can on a like really hot day, where it's dry, low humidity. Those flies can dry their wings pretty quickly, and they'll pop to the surface and ride on it just a little while, like 100 feet or so sometimes, and they'll get off the water. On kind of cooler days, or if it's raining with a light sprinkle, especially where they can't get their wings dry, they'll sit there and they'll be on the water kind of, as far as you can see them upstream ahead of you. They'll come down past you and roll downstream past you too. So a lot of times the dry fly fishing can be really good on those kind of overcast, rainy days, or cloudy days, because those bugs can't get their wings dry. And again, the fish take notice of what's going on around them. So they know if there's easy meals there, they're gonna take advantage of that.
That seems to be especially the case with the larger mayflies. I think they have a hard time when the rainy conditions really pulling free of that nymphal shuck. I think that's why emerger patterns are so important for them.
Yeah, probably similar to airplanes, right? A
Yeah.
bigger plane needs a longer runway to take off, right?
Yeah. Question is from Steve. How will the colder winter affect the hatches this year? I don't think too much. It's probably more temperature dependent, right, Gary? So as soon as that water hits a certain temperature, we're probably going to start seeing the bugs.
Yeah, yeah, not to geek out or anything like that, but there's a thing called degree days, and it's not just for fly tires. It's for people that do insect and pest removal and stuff like that, or even naturalists with flowers and stuff like that, where there's almost like they keep track of degree days where there's like an average of 50 degrees, and so like the winter can be freezing cold, but then if we switch, if things gears switch and we have a warm spring and the next few weeks gets really warm, that will speed it up too, because mathematically those 50-degree days add up and compile, and then these bugs start hatching. That's why you can't, hatch charts, we've all seen hatch charts, and they're good as far as, a ballpark, let's say, within a couple weeks, but on a really warm spring or a really mild winter, those can be forward 2, 3 weeks, sometimes even crazy as a month. Uh, and if things stay super cold for super long, then those hatches will be delayed, a few weeks as well.
Mhm. How important is the egg sac on a spinner imitation?
Usually not so much. But even like with our nymphs, sometimes we like little triggers on them, right? We tie like a hot spot on a nymph, or a hot collar, or a bright butt off it. Uh, some people like to believe that like on a Hendrickson, if you tie that yellow egg sac on, it can matter.
Mhm.
I'll talk about it now. I mentioned it a little bit. If you're fishing over some really picky or really educated fish, it can matter. Um, and you can actually go through a cycle of, okay, the males are going to fall first after that mating, right? So they're a smaller, they're a size smaller. So you can fish 14 males. That's just a rusty spinner. And then, about an hour later, when the females return, they're bigger, lighter in color. You might need to switch to a 14. You might want to put that egg sac on it, because a lot of the naturals have that bright yellow egg sac. And if you've ever looked at a natural, I mean, that yellow is bright. It's
Mhm.
pretty interesting. Same with the Grannoms with the green. I mean, it is not dull. Um, so I'm not a fish. I wish I knew how much it mattered. Um, it matters enough that I tie some of my flies with the yellow egg sacs on them. Um, and when you see the females following, again, they don't die right away. So I'll even fish some upright spinners with upright wings in the yellow egg sac, because sometimes they're just sitting there on the water and they don't quite die right away. And that can be an effective pattern. And because of the upright wing, they're easier to see on the water.
Yeah. A couple of questions here. I know we're going to answer in a minute. Justin, you got more things to give away there? We'll pick another name. How about
Yep, got three more items. So we'll go
Jim?
to the
We'll do Jim
what's
McCann.
this one? The mini grab cling magnet here.
Cool. And our winner for that is Jim McCann. So Jim, just
I
email
will.
info@darkskiesflyfishing.com. and some of your address, and we'll get that to you. Our next winner will be Jim Caldwell, also a claimer. Okay, great. Awesome. All right. So I think one of the questions was what fly is a good Hendrickson nymph imitation? And I think you're going to be tying one up here, correct?
I'm not tying a nymph this evening. I
Okay.
apologize. I decided to do two emergers this evening
Okay.
because you can actually double them a lot of times. I like patterns that you can do multiple things with and fish them different ways. A standard hare's ear nymph works really well for that Hendrickson nymph. Make it kind of big and fat and bulky. Uh, that works well for a Hendrickson nymph. Um, Also, you can tie any of your nymphs, your pheasant tails can also work. Do you have that? And then I don't know how well you can see that. That's a Hendrickson nymph that I fish. It's kind of like
Yeah.
uh, can you see
Black bee with
that?
like, is that like gray, dark hairs here?
Yeah, so it's a mix of tans and browns and blacks. Not many things in nature are one solid color. That's why when I do a lot of my fly tying, I love synthetic, or I love not synthetics. I love natural materials.
Mhm.
Because like if you take like a hare's ear, if you look at a rabbit pelt, right? There's browns, there's grays, there's tans, and you mix all that up, you throw it in a blender or you buy it off the wall. It has a bunch of different colors. So that nymph that I showed earlier, is has different colors in it. And let me see if I can get my screen real quick.
Hmm. Then I think before we get started with the fly tying portion, make sure Justin doesn't have another one to thing to give away there. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, see how that's different colors?
Yeah.
Through there with darks and then browns and then some tans up to the front. Same with the legs and the tails.
Mhm.
So as far as a pattern, you just want to make sure mix up those dubbings. Take two or three of your dubbings. Take some brown, take some black, take some tan. Kind of mix it up together, but not thoroughly, because you want it as you dub that on the hook. You want it to have different colors through its body.
Cool. All right, Justin, you have a couple more things there. Is that right?
Yep. We got two more items if you want to pull two more names and
Okay, we'll do this the very high tech in how we select our names. Andrew Latanzi. Andrew.
is that better?
And what is he getting? What is Andrew getting?
Nope. We got the double stack mag bar,
Okay.
and then
Cool.
I got another tacky box.
All right. And for this one, we got Wayne McCullough. McCullough. Somebody wanted to know, Gary, does that fly have a name that you just held up?
I don't need my flies.
And also someone asked size nymph patterns again, 12 and 14s for the Hendricksons. But um, so is that a homegrown pattern, Gary, or is
Homegrown pattern. I don't think enough of myself to name my flies ever.
that I'm the same? Yeah. Cool. All right. So we want to get started tying some flies.
Absolutely. So the first fly I'm going to tie tonight is it's a spin off Renee Harrop's a captive dun, and this is Renee's pattern. I don't claim it as mine certainly, but I made a couple changes to it, just of different materials and things that I like to fish, and what that imitates is a that dun. We talked about the duns that don't make it quite to the surface. They're stillborn or injured or crippled, or it's still that bug. It also imitates that bug while it's under the water before it hatches. So I can fish this fly wet under the surface. I can even put split shot on this and fish it kind of down towards the bottom as a nymph as it's practicing. Remember I talked about that, how those flies practice swimming to the surface for, a few days. I can put floatant on just, let me get my pointer here. I can put floatant on just the wing and have this body sit underneath the surface of the water and just have the CDC on top float above the surface, or I can put floating on the whole fly and fish it completely on top like a standard dry fly. So that's this kind of is a almost like a three-in-one where I can fish this as a nymph, I can fish it as an emerger, or I can fish it as a dry fly, just on how I set up my rig for it. So. I'll get tying that now. I tie this usually on a size 14, sometimes 12s, but mostly 14s. That way it can cover the male and the female. And so I got a 14 hook in the vise here. The first material that I like to start off is we want to imitate that shuck that I was showing you, right? So that the nymphal shuck, as the adult's crawling out of its nymphal shuck, and because it's stuck in the transition process, I'm gonna use, you can use like a brown, Zelon or crinkled Zelon or anything like that. Rene Harrop, when he designed this pattern, he did a cool thing where he uses just a synthetic dubbing. You don't want to use a natural dubbing. You want some flash in it, and you want a dubbing with some longer fibers. And so you can use, something like Greg Senio's Fusion Dub that Hairline sells, or you can use like an MFC um, dubbing. I like it in like a brownish color with some reds, some blacks in it. Just this is Halloween colored. This is MFC, but there are different dubbing companies with similar dubbings as this. So what I'll do, I put my thread on. I'm using tonight. I'm using a Semperfli Nano Silk 30 denier, and the reason why I like the 30 denier is how thin it is. But it's strong because it's nano silk, so I can pull on this. You can see, it's pretty hard to break this. Now watch, I'll break it later this evening. Um, but for its thickness, it's incredibly strong. So I'll tie this on. I'll basically start it above the barb of the hook. Make a couple wraps. I'll secure it. And then I'll take it up. I'll wrap it. What I like to do, I like to make my body uniform. Or I'll build a taper into it as I go. I'll show you that too. I'll tie that up and then I'll fold it back over itself and wrap it back and start forming my underbody. And I'll wrap that almost to the bend of the hook, even further down than most flies, like a dry fly. Because if I want this to sit down just at a slight angle a little bit, like it's that shuck hanging off the back of it. Then I'll take that. That's pretty long there, so I'll measure it to length. A little trick is to use the points of your scissors. You can measure from the eye to the bend of the hook. Put that there, but instead of just snipping this off at 90 degrees here and making that look face, I like to just come in here and just kind of cut it loosely and make it rough it up and make it look natural. Again, most things in nature, especially hatching mayflies, they're not perfect. If you look at them, they're all messed up. So I like to imitate that. So I like to say it's not pretty, but it's realistic. The next material I use is I like wood duck. You can use dyed mallard if you want. But if you look at the nymph on that photo, uh, I wish I could do two things at once so I could flip back and forth with the photos that I'd shown you earlier. The tails on your Hendricksons are usually barred with like a yellowish tan and a black through them. So that's why I like a wood duck feather. I'll take those, I'll line the tips up, I'll pull them perpendicular to the stem, and that helps. A little trick there if you want to get your tips lined up. A lot of times put those perpendicular to the stem like that, and then I'll just grab them and pull them off together. I'm going to tie those tails in just a tad bit shorter than the shuck that I tied in previously. Pinch those there, tie them in. Again, I'll wrap that up to the front. And then what I talked about earlier, you don't have to do this. I like to do it. I'm going to trim this off at a length where when I fold it back, it's not going to make it the whole way back to the bend of the hook. And what that will do is it will leave the front end of this body thicker here towards the eye of the hook than the back. And that just helps build your taper for the next step for the body. So then I'll fold that back. Oh, one got away from me there. And so that's a little bit thicker um, as we go. So the next step, Renee Harrop likes to use like a goose biot. Just my own personal uh, preference. I don't love tying with goose biots. I think they make a clunky tie off towards the front of the hook. I like to use wild turkey tail. And the reason why I like to use a wild turkey tail, if you know, I pulled up that nymph picture and showed you it earlier. The coloring is, you know, again, a lot of those browns and blacks mixed together. It's not a solid color like, you know, a lot of synthetics are. So I like that turkey tail. It gives you the variance, the mottled look of the browns and the blacks. So I'll take up a few fibers of those. One thing that people don't like about tying with turkey tails is the tips are often pretty brittle. So I'll take those about a third of the way and I'll just hack them off there because I don't need all that length anyways. And then I'll get that. I'll hold it. I'll tie it in by the tips. And turkey also has a reputation, deservedly so, for breaking. And this is one of the reasons where this 30 denier nano silk shines, is I can take this and I can do two things. You can either wrap these around each other because this thread then will be wrapped within this and hold it together. That way, if it frays, you know, you catch a couple fish on it, you don't want your body falling apart. But what I like to do with this thread, what I can do is, let me take a couple wraps back. See how I have that little gap here? If I don't tie that in far enough back, I'm going to have that gap. So I want to take that right up to where those tails are tied in. Now what I can do is I can chase this around the hook. So as I wrap the turkey with one hand, I take my thread with the other hand. And then I just switch as I go up. And that way I'm ribbing that turkey all at the same time. And that thread is so thin, it gets lost in that turkey. You can't even see it in there virtually. But yet that secures it and holds it together. I'll make a couple wraps behind it, a couple wraps in front of it. It's secure. Take my scissors down and tie that off. And again, that I love that turkey body because it's not one solid color. Hopefully the lighting's good enough where you can see it. Now you're full of like kind of browns and blacks and even the reddish, which are all colors of the Hendrickson nymphs and the male Hendrickson bodies. The next phase of this is I'm going to start on the wing now. And I'm going to take just a natural CDC feather. And I'm going to take a CDC feather. I'm going to try to find one that doesn't have a super thick tip. I'm sorry, I wore the same color as the feather tonight. But I'm going to try to get a feather that doesn't have a crazy thick stem in it. And I'm going to pull all these back. I'm going to tie this in. The length doesn't matter because I'm going to cut it at the end anyways. About halfway up the feather, I'm going to take it and I'm going to tie it in kind of right there. Tie that in on top of the hook. Again, with this super thin thread, I can take more wraps with this and not build up any bulk, which is nice. Take that, tie that off. So I should have mentioned this earlier. I stopped with that body about the 1/3 length of the hook. So I'm 1/3 of the way from the eye there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in legs. I'm going to use CDC for the legs as well, but I'm going to use different colored CDC. So in a lot of the areas I've fished, I had mentioned that the female Hendricksons are a mix of like a pink and an olive. So I'm going to choose two CDC feathers here. I'm going to choose a pink CDC feather and an olive CDC feather. I'm going to put those on top of each other. And I'll pair them up. And again, you know, not much in nature is one solid color, so that's why I like to use two different colors. I'll pair those up, pull the barbules off the stem of the hook, or off the stem of the hook, off the stem of the feather, and get those to stand at 90 degrees perpendicular to the stem. And I'll take a clip. There's, you know, different companies sell different things for this. I'll take a clip and I'll put those in the clip and just grab some of those fibers off that. Sorry if I'm doing some of this off camera. So I got them in my clip, and I'm going to cut those stems out. So now I have my two different CDC colors in the clip that I'm going to put in a dubbing loop. So now I'll get those back out of the way. I'll create a dubbing loop, close it off, and then I'll take my thread and leave it right behind the eye. Take my dubbing loop tool. And with this dubbing loop tool, I can open and close this loop as I want to put stuff in it. So if I'm using multiple materials, I can open it and close it as I put different materials into it. Makes it really nice. So I got my CDC in my dubbing loop. I'll give it a spin. Lock all those in there. And then I'll wind them in up. Again, pull this first CDC feather out of the way. That's just a natural done CDC feather, the first one. And then as I wrap these, I want these to imitate basically the thorax and the legs. I'll just wrap them towards the eye, preening those back so they don't trap each other. And then that pink and that olive are basically the two colors of the Hendricksons. You know, if you look at least on our area streams, even the ones up in the Kettle Creek watershed, they have that, you know, it's banded almost like pink olive, or some of them are pink and tan, depending on where you live. So just change it up to the streams that you fish. I'll tie that off. Cut that off. Then again, I'll clean up behind the head a little bit. I'll take a little dubbing brush and try to comb out any trapped fibers that I have in there. And then I'll take my first feather, I'll pull it up over the eye, and then I push it back, and that creates that bubble there. And once I have that little bubble, I'll change hands. I'll hold that bubble, and then I'll tie that off by using a pin trap. So I trap that thread between my index and my thumb, and then I pull it down over the hook. Come in, lift these up out of the way so I don't have the head crowded. Trim those off, and then I can finish the head. And that is kind of my version of Renee Harrop's captive done. And again, depending on the way I use it, you know, we gave away some, I think the high and dry. I'm a big fan of the high and dry products. It works especially well on the CDC. So again, you know, early in the hatch, I can fish this thing down low with a split shot as a nymph if I want. And then as the hatch progresses, I can either change it or take like the powdered floating with the brush and brush that CDC and dry it off, and then start fishing it as either an emerger or a dry. And then if I really want it floating, I'll take the CDC. I like the spray for the CDC because it doesn't mat it down. Like sometimes if you use a gel or paste and you're not careful and you get too much on that CDC, you can compress it down too much. So this little spritzer bottle is really nice for the CDC. Uh, any questions on the captive done? Maybe if I put that white
There
back on.
were there was
Flame.
a question that said, "Is that a dry fly hook?"
Repeat that, Ralph.
Is that a dry fly hook? What hook are you using to tie
I'm
this pattern?
I'm sorry, that is a dry fly hook. That's just a standard dry fly hook. So whatever brand is your preference. I think this is probably a Rex dry fly hook. Just standard dry fly. I'm sorry, I don't have the model with me because I didn't bring the package.
Nice
Sorry, I didn't
pattern.
mention that at the beginning.
Yeah, nice pattern, Gary. Good tying.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else you got for us tonight?
So I got another, it's a two-in-one pattern, I like to call it, because it imitates basically, it's a two-in-one, uh, which imitates basically the male Hendrickson. So you'll see it's a kind of that darker, rusty body. This is an emerger pattern. It's a pattern created by a friend of mine by the name of Jerry Reegan in northern Michigan, out of Grayling, Michigan, up on the Ausable River. And I first started fishing this fly about 15 years ago with Jerry up on the Manistee River up there in Michigan. And when fish are eating Hendricksons and you can't figure out why they won't eat yours, uh, more often than not, I found this fly for some reason they'll eat it. And that's probably why Jerry's been fishing it for 50 years. Uh, so basically, I'm going to tie that now. It's another, he refers to it as a dry emerger pattern. And so we'll go through it now and why I like it. Again, I'm going to tie this on a size 14 hook, standard dry fly hook. Any questions from anybody here? Sorry as I change gears here, guys. All right, I'm using actually the same thread. I mean, I use this thread for most of my patterns now, uh, except my lighter, like my sulfurs and stuff like that. I'll use a lighter color thread, but all my browns and blacks, I pretty much use this nano silk because it just disappears. I'm going to take a moose body for it for the tails, and Hendricksons have three tails. Trout can't count. But I just when I tie in with moose, I don't want it to be too bulky. I try to pick three tails from the moose. Get them pretty close in length. Bear with me as I fight my vision. It's interesting. The older you get, the more difficult it gets to tie away from your home desk and vise. Okay. We got three tails. I like on our mayfly tails. We're often taught to tie, the length of the shank of the hook. I personally think that's too short. For if you look at most mayfly tails, especially spinners, because I can use this as a spinner pattern as well, because I'll trim the hackle off the bottom of it and fish it as a spinner. Their tails are longer than that. So I include both the eye and the bend. And for this pattern, I also give it even a little more than that. So. Uh, Almost a shank and a half in length. I'll tie that in. That looks like a good length. Again, wind that up the length of the body. And that does two things. That secures it in there so they don't pull out. And it starts forming that uniform underbody instead of just trimming them off here and having a clump up there. I keep a smoother underbody that way. This is a pretty simple tie, but an incredibly effective pattern. Next, I'll choose. I'm going to tie the. You can tie this in the female version or the male version. Since I did the other one in more of a female version, I'm going to do this in a male version. I like the for this the Fulling Mill Tactical Dry Fly Dub in red quill, which is uh, the male Hendrickson. So, but yeah, any reddish, rusty um, dry fly dubbing for the body. One of the things I see with beginner fly tyers, the maybe the biggest mistake I see them make, even whether it's a nymph or a dry fly, but especially with dry flies, is way too much dubbing. Uh, sometimes you could tie a dozen flies with how much dubbing somebody's putting on the thread of a hook. So I just have a little wisp of it there. It's I can see it in the camera. It's almost difficult to see. I use so little. But if you look at you pick a mayfly up off the stream that's floating on the water or in a back eddy or whatever and look at it, their bodies are so frail and delicate. I think we overdub most of our patterns and I'm guilty of it too, is fly tire. So try to keep this body as thin as you can get it. If you need more, you can always add more. But you can see that on my thread. Not only do I have a thin thread, but my dubbing's pretty thin on there. I'll just dub that on there. Again, get that about 2/3 of the way up the hook. And then the wing on this is a unique, up in Michigan, that a lot of the old grayling patterns use a lot of deer hair for bodies, wings, just because it was plentiful up there when those guys were tying, and we're talking the 50s and 60s when a lot of these patterns were created. So I like deer hair wing on this. And it's going to be kind of like a down wing, almost like a caddis, but kind of set at a 45-degree angle. If you look at deer hair, it comes in all different shades from different deer where they live in different areas. I like a darker deer hair for this because the red quill has a very dark slate wing. So the females have kind of like a lightish dun, medium-ish dun wing. The males have a real dark, they call it slate wing, where it's almost, it's not black, but it's close to black. They're so dark. So when choosing a piece of deer hair, don't choose a dyed piece that you would use for a real bright elk hair caddis. Get a darker piece of deer hair. And although this is a size 14 hook, I don't want to take as much hair that we typically take to tie a 14 caddis. It would be way too thick. I want to keep this thin at probably about half as much as you would use on an elk hair caddis. So I'll take that. That's a nice piece of deer hair. So my tips are pretty lined up. So, but if they're not, every deer is different. If your tips aren't lined up, I'll put it in a hair stacker and stack it. But those are pretty lined up right where they're at. So I'm going to measure this. Again, I want the wing to be from about the eye to the bend of the hook. Once I got that measurement point there, that's where I keep my thumb and my index finger. I'll place it where I want to tie it in. I'll switch hands. And then what I'll do is I'll trim that just at a slight angle. And I'll tie it in there. You can tie it in before you trim it, or you can trim it first. It's basically personal preference. Uh, Take a couple soft wraps first, collect those materials, and then as I wrap, I'll tighten up my pressure. And again, because this is, this thread's so thin, I know I keep repeating it, but it really does allow you to make more wraps with less bulk. And then that's my wing. So again, I want that wing kind of sticking off just a bit past the bend of the hook there is the length I want. And what that imitates is, when I went through the PowerPoint presentation, that imitates that wing that's not fully upright and developed and stuff, and that fish, is under the belief that it's not going to fly away right away because it's still trying to get those wings dried out. And then, the last step to this fly is just to tie in a hackle. And why this has happened, I think this is why this pattern fishes so well is I tie on this hackle like kind of standard cat scale style in a way. Not parachute, but just standard hackle. And this will allow me to move that fly. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. What I like is a dun. Again, I sound like a broken record here. I don't like materials that are one color or one shade. That's why I like these. This is a dun, but it has a grizzly to it. So again, it's just that variation, and the light hits it differently. It might look to the fish like it's moving, just different colors. Like if you pick up one of those naturals, and you'll see that they're not one solid color. So I even like to do that with my hackle that's going to represent the legs. So I'll clean the barbules off the bottom end of the hook. I'll off the bottom end of the feather, and I'll expose that stem. I'll tie it in on my side of the hook. Give myself a little room to start wrapping that, and then I'll tie that stem in. Tie it in good, return my thread back, park it behind the eye of the hook, and then I'll take this and I'll start wrapping it forward. I like my dull side forward on this. And I'll take 5 or 6 wraps as I work towards the front. Just one in front of the other, as I go forward. If I have some barbules that want to cheat forward, I'll just take them and preen them back like that. And depending on like the stream I'm fishing, if I know it's really heavy current or whatever, I'll take more wraps of hackle. And if I know I'm going to be fishing kind of calmer water, uh, I'll only put 2 or 3 wraps on. And quite frankly, if you look at my fly boxes, I'll have some of both. So depending on where I'm fishing and when, I'll choose either a heavily hackled pattern or a lightly hackled pattern. Couple wraps, tie that off. Again, pull all these back so they don't get trapped in here. That one doesn't want to play nicely. I can hold that back and I'll whip finish and tie it off. And what this hackle, I started to say earlier, what this hackle does, it allows me a lot of times, if you're dead drift a fly over a fish and it's unpressured or uneducated, they'll eat it. But like I said, here, like around the Cumberland Valley, and I'll even like the fly fishing project on Kettle Creek or whatever, those fish get educated because it's catch and release a lot of times. Those fish have been caught a few times. Certainly here, the yellow breeches in the catch and release water. And if you dead drift the fly over those fish, a lot of times, especially the same pattern that they saw the day before or whatever, they're going to be a lot more hesitant to eat it. So what they start keying in on is motion because when these real bugs are hatching, they're moving, they're struggling, they're trying to dry their wings, they're trying to get out of their shuck, and they're trying to escape, and they're fighting for their life. They want to take off and live their life. They've waited a year for this, and so I'll twitch my fly. Again, I'll take some float and I'll put it on my leader about up until about the first 4 inches of leader before my fly. I don't like to put grease on that. Uh, and so what that does, it helps my leader float on the surface of the water, and I can just give it little twitches. And with this hackle, that bug I can skate it across the water a little bit. And I'm not talking a twitch that's 5, 6 inches or a foot. I think that's a lot of times the mistake we do when we say to twitch our fly is, we say we're fishing a 9 foot rod and we move our hand 3 inches. But if you look at the tip of your rod that after you move the handle 3 inches, that tip's moving 2 feet up in the air. And then it's going to pull that fly 2 feet. So you got to be very careful in your twitching. You only want to move these flies when you're twitching them an inch or two, even a half inch. The least amount of area that you can move your fly, you want it to move so it looks like it's alive and struggling, but you don't want it to scream a foot across the water. The better you'll be. And this pattern does a really good job of allowing you to do that. Just those micro twitches to just make it look alive. And that is Jerry Reegan's hatching emerger. or dry emerger, I'm sorry. Any questions about that?
Nice looking pattern. Somebody asked, is the hook shank standard or 1XL?
Standard.
And then have you ever
Same
used
hook as the last pattern. Sorry,
Sorry,
Ralph.
okay. Somebody asked, have you ever used an actual quill for this fly for the body?
Yes, I have, and you can. The quills look really nice, and you can super glue them down and stuff like that. But a lot of times after you catch a few fish, the quills start getting beat up. They'll lose almost like their coating too. And I've never been a fan of putting like some people say, oh, you just put some of the new thin UV treatment over the quill to protect it. But then I find with dry flies, if you do that, you've now got yourself a pentagon in a lot of ways, and they just head straight to the bottom like we put on our UV nymphs.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
yeah, quills look great. They work great. They're just not as durable.
Right. Somebody asked, I don't know if we mentioned what the thread color was that you were using.
Brown.
Brown. That's right. You did say that in the beginning. Somebody asked if they can find a picture of these flies on the net so they can see later, and everybody will be receiving a recording of this. A link will be uploading it. So to be able to rewatch this and tie along with Gary, you'll be able to do that. Look for that link probably tomorrow. Once it's uploaded.
Ralph, an interesting thing about the thread, I failed to mention it in the PowerPoint version of this. It's interesting with the Hendricksons, we talked about the body color being different. The male Hendrickson have big red, like giant red eyes. Um, so if
Okay.
you really want to geek out and you're tying a red quiller, the male version of this, you can use a red thread up top to mimic those eyes. While the females have a smaller black eye. Uh, now, I don't think the fish care about that at all. But if it makes you more confident in your pattern, go for it.
Cool. Well, if there's no more questions, I guess we'll start wrapping this up. Um, Justin, you have anything you want to add here before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody who signed up and logged in and is going to watch us at a later time. And also, like, if there's any feedback that anybody has for us, we have three more episodes here with Gary that's on our website, and I know Ralph has on his. So, if there's anything that you think we can do to improve or anything that you would like to see in the future, please email us and let us know. We want to continue with this education portion and working together. So, yeah, don't be afraid to give us feedback. We just want to continue to get better. So again, thanks to everybody who logged on.
Absolutely. And there was a question about providing materials list. And yes, when I send out that follow-up email tomorrow, I'll include the full list of materials in there as well. And so you'll be able to know exactly what to get to tie the patterns. As Justin mentioned, we got three more of these scheduled. We're doing the Grannoms. Then that's the next one on March 19th. And then 2 weeks after that will be the March Browns. And 2 weeks after that, the Sulphurs. So yeah, if you already signed up for them, there's no need to sign up again. We have all your information, and you'll just expect to get a link to those usually a day or so before the event. But I truly appreciate your support of Precision Fly and Tackle and Dark Skies Fly Fishing. And wish you the best of luck on the water this season. And like as Justin said, we welcome all feedback. And feel free to send to info@darkskiesflyfishing.com. Especially all our winners there who won the prizes. We'll get those out in the next couple of days here. But thank you, everybody. And
Hey, Ralph, one more thing. If
yeah,
people want to email me, can you include my email is Gary at Precision Fly and Tackle?
you got it.
Maybe put that in the email tomorrow. If people
Abs-
have questions, they feel free to reach out directly to me.
Absolutely. Yep. We'll share as many resources in that email as we can here. And yeah, hope to see everybody again on March 19th when we talk about Grannoms. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.